After years of refusing to pay scalpers an extra penny or even wake up slightly early, I finally managed to get a PS5 and a Series X with no trouble at all. I wouldn't necessarily say that I regret buying them or anything like that. In fact, I actually do like these consoles quite a bit, but still though, I've gotta say that these are easily the most pointless upgrades I've ever experienced, and if you give me a couple minutes, I'll explain why. A while back, I made a video talking about how the 8th console generation was the most pointless one of all time, but a lot of people misunderstood and thought I was saying that it was entirely pointless. However, let me make it clear that it wasn't completely unnecessary, just the most unnecessary. My whole point was that most PS4 and Xbox One games had better visuals for shadows and things like that, but ultimately, the entire libraries could have been ported onto the PS3 and 360 if absolutely necessary, and the only ones who'd really notice are hardcore gamers. And look, I know there's no way to say what I'm about to say without making a lot of people angry, but ever since the Resident Evil 4 remake had the nerve to ask me if I'd prefer performance or frame rate, aka ray tracing, I've just been getting more and more red-ass thinking about it. Because when it's making you choose between performance and frame rate, what it's really asking you is what you want to sacrifice, and I think it's really friggin' lame to buy a new console and have to choose what area you want it to slack off in. I know PCs have been doing this for a while, but at least it makes sense there, since everybody is a unique computer, not everybody's gonna have the same hardware, so if you don't feel like spending extra money, then maybe it is wise to cut a few corners graphically here and there. When it comes to consoles, though, you shouldn't have to think about what you want to sacrifice, you should just put the game in and play. Look, I'm not saying the consoles need to be stronger than the strongest gaming PCs, which also have trouble with ray tracing for whatever it's worth. But if you can't put a console out that can effortlessly run ray tracing with absolutely positively zero drawbacks, then maybe you should wait till you actually have a machine that can. Because I don't care what anybody says, if it's not effortless, then you can't really claim to have it as a feature. When 99% of the games that have been coming out over the past few years are also on the old consoles anyway, then why on earth was there a rush for new hardware in the first place? Don't get me wrong, I honestly like the idea of new consoles not having exclusives for a few years, since there's really no good reason to deprive over 100 million people of a game in the hopes of forcing them to buy new hardware that won't be readily available for 3 years thanks to impatient rich people funding the scalping business, especially since all the old consoles could still run all the new games just fine as far as the actual gameplay is concerned. I'm also completely content with the idea that we're just not going to see crazy graphical leaps anymore after the 7th console generation reached the everything looks fine milestone. I don't mind buying a new console just to see some more details in the shadows and puddles or have slightly more impressive draw distances and things like that. Like, if you put a brand new gaming platform on the market, then it should at the very least be able to give you all those little upgrades without any sacrifices. Like, seriously, why do we need the PS5 and Series X to come out in 2020 during a gnarly chip shortage to make obtaining one way harder? To play Flight Simulator or Final Fantasy 16 in 2023? Wouldn't it have been better to just wait a few more years so the hardware would be a little stronger? Or, you know, at the very least capable of ray tracing with fewer or ideally zero drawbacks? I mean, we'd have gotten the exact same games either way, so I don't see why there was such a rush. Look, obviously I know these consoles are still better than their predecessors, even with the ray tracing turned off at all times. PS5 and Series X have twice the memory as the PS4 and Xbox with 16GB, and about 10 to 11 times the teraflops, not to mention faster load times, and the rumble in the DualSense controller is honestly really impressive to me. Again, these consoles aren't entirely pointless, but even though they are definitely better, the Series X version of the Resident Evil 4 remake still can't seem to figure out how to display these freaking puddles, regardless of whether or not I have ray tracing turned on. To be fair, I'm sure this is just Capcom doing the release now, patch later gimmick, since even Steam players are having issues with the souped up PCs. I'm just saying that while I don't necessarily regret buying either console, it is the least excited I've ever been to own new hardware. Even though I do think it's really cool that Microsoft wanted an entry-level Series S for people who might not be able to afford the Series X, the fact is that if every Xbox game this generation has to be compatible with the Series S, then doesn't that just hold the Series X and even PS5 versions of multiplats back? After all, the group's only as fast as the slowest member, so to me, it does make the buff 9th gen consoles feel a little more pointless if devs are either forced to or choose to keep the Series S in mind. Seeing as all the tech fancy gamers are just gonna call me a Nintendo fan man anyway, I might as well go ahead and date this video even quicker by saying that this is another reason why I'd rather just wait as long as possible for the Switch's successor as opposed to rushing one out that's only like an ass hair more impressive than what we already have now. Don't get me wrong, I'd personally love a Switch successor right now, but I really think the longer we wait, the better it'll be. No, I'm not naive enough to think that the new Switch U is going to be as strong as the Series X, PS5, or even the Steam Deck if we wait like 3 more years. And I'd offer money that it's not going to offer seamless ray tracing either. However, I do think that had the above average sized end rushed one out in 2022, then it'd have either only been marginally better but still underpowered, or went the Steam Deck route and been expensive as frig, and I know plenty of us would have been on board with that, but realistically, we all know Nintendo's going to try to keep costs down so the average person would want to buy it. Nintendo originally said they wanted the Switch to last 10 years, which I don't think necessarily means no successor till 2027, but I do think that at this point in gaming history, consoles should get rid of this idea that 5 to 7 years is an absolute must just because it's how things have been for a long time. I mean, when you compare the best-looking PS3 and PS4 games, you won't find thousands of crazy, clear examples of how the jump was a night-and-day difference like you'd see in all the other generations beforehand. Now that we're on the third year of the PS5 and Series X's lifespans, we're seeing the exact same games with better visuals and performance, sure, but only about as noticeable as the last console generation. Except now, instead of just putting games in and playing, we gotta pick and choose what we want to sacrifice when it comes to ray tracing. Don't get me wrong, ray tracing's incredible when it works, and definitely the future, especially when it comes to audio, but I just don't think 2020 was really the time to put consoles out that try and harness this feature, kind of like how the Sega CD tried to bring CDs to gaming a little too early. I'm sure some people are going to say ray tracing's never going to be completely effortless, but yeah, right, they say that about just about everything, and now any jabroni can just watch Time Cop on their phones anytime they want, among all kinds of other wacky things. To be honest, I don't even know what else phones can do yet. I still haven't gotten tired of watching Time Cop. And look, I love my PS5 and Series X and don't regret my purchases one bit, even though it might sound like I'm negative on the whole experience. I just think that this console leap's even more unnecessary than the last one's all, and I really wish that Sony and Microsoft would just have some kind of a meeting and agree to stop trying to rush to beat each other in the market with new hardware. I think it'd have been ideal to have waited a few more years for the PS5 and Series X, but now that we have them, can we just wait until like 2030 for the PS6 and God knows whatever the next Xbox is going to be called? And I might feel like it's time for new hardware once 2027 or 2029 roll around, because, I mean, that is what we've been conditioned to be used to over these years. But when the first few years of the PS6's life are just going to be PS5 games anyway, then, honestly, what's the rush? Anyway, that's all for today, but if you got a kick out of my incoherent rambling and disturbing imagery, though, then you should check out this video I made about the history of arrogant video game consoles. But if you'll excuse me, though, I gotta go watch my neighbor Terry cut a tree down for some reason. Later!